Richard, let's go for it.
Drugs are a huge problem, and the Americans have concluded that's in their strategic interest. And we've got a drugs problem. We deal with it in our ways. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Nigel Farage also said, as the second part of that tweet, if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. Why would it make China and Russia...
This is the moment where theory crashes into reality. On one side, a guest defending Trump's actions as strategic strength. On the other, a presenter pushing that logic to its breaking point and refusing to let it slide. Because if this argument holds, it doesn't stop at Venezuela. It opens a door nobody wants to walk through. There's one line in this exchange that exposes everything, and we'll come back to it at the end. If you want clear breakdowns without the spin, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Now let's watch this together, and then I'll share my thoughts at the end.
With that. Does Reform, did you support what Trump has done?
Yeah, I don't think anybody should shed any tears for the removal of an illegitimate, brutal drugs lord who was running Venezuela. I think it's good news for the West. I think it's bad news for Putin and for the Chinese communist regime. And the question now is, the challenge now is to ensure that Venezuela doesn't descend into what happened in Iraq or Libya. And so, that's the next challenge. And obviously, the US couldn't leave a vacuum. They mustn't leave a vacuum in Venezuela. So they need to live up to what President Trump talked about yesterday in terms of running it until there are elections and a peaceful transition back to a democratic Venezuela.
I thought that Trump and MAGA, and actually Reform as well, were very sceptical about foreign entanglements.
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to do what any government, any prime minister or president...
Watch how quickly this shifts from justification to defence. The pressure is already building.
...has got to look after the security and interests of their own people.
But he ran against forever wars, he ran against getting involved,
but at the end
and
of
now
the
he's
day,
talking about running Venezuela.
Well, until there's a transition back to a democratically elected government. But at the end of the day, actually, they've concluded that Maduro and his drugs regime was against the interests of the American people in terms of the vast amounts of illegal activity,
all
of
independent
drugs,
analysis,
cocaine.
All in independent analysis, Richard Tice shows that in terms of drug supply into the United States, very little of it comes from Venezuela. Most of it comes from Pacific routes.
Actually, that's not what I've seen. In terms of fentanyl, that's correct. But in terms of cocaine, that's not correct.
5% of American cocaine comes from Venezuela. Most of it comes from Mexico, comes from Colombia.
But there's also the brutality, the violence, the control of the cartels in the US that are essentially part of. And, but all of these issues, I mean...
Notice the move here, facts are challenged. But the argument doesn't slow down.
The drug wars. This is an international war on the drug terrorists, the narco terrorists. That is the reality.
Trump was open. This isn't about drugs. This is about oil. He was really clear about it.
But there's another point to it, which is why I say the people who won't be happy is Russia and China, because of course they've got interests in Venezuela in terms of the oil. And who's better actually to be helping Venezuela use their oil reserves? Is it the US or is it Russia and China taking it for their own interests? I have to say the interest of the West is that it's the US.
Well, on that basis, would go into countries all over the world. China's got huge investments.
The reality is that there are many reasons why Maduro was very, very bad news for the West. Bad news for the UK as well. I mean, much of our cocaine, I understand, comes from Venezuela and nearby countries. So let's see. There are serious risks to what.
This is where oil, power, and principle start blurring together.
Unorthodox and contrary to international law, but if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. I'll come back to that second bit in a moment. But he accepts, you think it does break international law?
Yeah, if you look at Article 51 of the UN rules, most lawyers would probably say, well, it's just the wrong side of the issue of self-defense. Some will say that it's just inside, because what happens now is there'll be a report sent to the UN of Article 51 saying that it's in self-defense because the state was unable or unwilling to do so. So look, it's arguable, but the reality is, in terms of domestic US law, it's clearly
self-defense, because Venezuela is clearly not a threat to the United States.
Why have we bombed a weapons depot in Syria? It's exactly the same point. Because ultimately, so are the drugs laws. They're terrorists carrying out violent attacks on people in the US. You look at your strategic national interest, not just tomorrow, but also months, years down the track, and you have to say what is in our national interest.
Drugs don't come from Venezuela. They come from other countries. So it doesn't make any sense.
Some do, some don't. But ultimately, you have to say, as a government, as a leader of a country, you say, what is in our strategic national interest? They've concluded it is. I have to say, the people who will regret this.
Here's the problem. Once you say national interest, anything can fit inside it.
Is Russia and China, and that's a good thing.
65%.
And also remember, the other key thing is what Trump said yesterday about Putin. He said that he was not thrilled with Putin. In Trump language, that probably means that he's very angry with Putin.
But you mentioned
and in a sense,
drugs.
that's a good thing for the security of Ukraine, for example.
You mentioned drugs. 65 to 70% of our cocaine comes from Colombia. Should we be going into Colombia? Should we be taking out Colombia on the basis of this? Should we be taking out the Colombian leader?
No, what I'm saying is you've got to look at what is in your individual strategic interest.
But why not?
Well, we look at defending ourselves from drugs. We have our own war on drugs, which sadly we're losing.
So let's take out the Colombians then.
No, that's what I'm saying is individual governments have to make individual choices based on also what we're able to do.
So if our government came along, if Keir Starmer said, look, we're concerned about drugs as well and the war on drugs. As I say, 70% of our cocaine comes from Colombia. We're going to kidnap the Colombian president. Literally, you'd be like, go for it.
Just yesterday, John Healey, our defence secretary, said that actually ISIS, on a strategic view, is bad for the UK. That's why we're bombing weapons depots in Syria, and I support that.
And you've cited what Trump has said about drugs, and therefore...
Listen carefully. This logic doesn't end where he thinks it does.
Countries in the West, countries in the West are losing drug wars and will make individual choices about how to respond to it. Because the truth is that the money and the violence and the armed conflict that comes from the drugs wars. I mean, essentially, Maduro has been leading a cartel that's been running Venezuela, and much else has essentially sort of.
Most of their drugs didn't come from Venezuela. It doesn't make any sense.
Substantial amount of drugs from Venezuela comes into the UK.
More comes from Colombia, more comes from Mexico.
And Europe. And it's all bad.
Yeah, sure. So that's what I'm saying. So on this basis, let's call it the Trump doctrine. You support Trump. Drugs are a huge problem. Let's take out the Colombians, Richard. Let's go for it.
Drugs are a huge problem. And the Americans have concluded that's in their strategic interest. And we've got a drugs problem. We deal with it in our ways. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Nigel Farage also said, as the second part of that tweet, if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. Why would it make China and Russia...
That line wasn't hypothetical. It was a stress test, and it landed.
Russia and China take a very different message from this, which is great. We've been saying for a long time, we've all got spheres of interest. The US have got the Western Hemisphere. We've got our spheres of interest. Might is right. We'll do what we like.
Well, I take a different view. I take the view that actually, the Chinese literally had a special envoy and a delegation in Venezuela this week talking presumably about oil because, China needs oil. So, if we can do actually, if Trump and has essentially given them pause for thought, then I think that is a good thing against the Chinese communist regime. Let's remember that is what they are. They are a communist regime. And what he said about Putin, again, will make Putin think. And I think that is important. It may well have an influence on negotiations around Ukraine.
What if the Chinese think, the leader of Taiwan is deleterious to our national security, so we're going to abduct him?
I think what they'll think is that actually President Trump should not be underestimated, and that will give them pause for thought.
What if Putin decided to abduct Zelensky?
They're all what ifs.
Would you say that was all right?
What they show is that President Trump is not to be underestimated, and I think that will give Putin and the Chinese communist regime pause for thought. Who knows? Obviously there are challenges ahead. The Americans now have got to make sure that Venezuela...
Now the argument goes global, and the consequences get much bigger.
Gives serious pause for thought to Putin and the Chinese regime.
Emily Thornberry said to me this morning she thinks that Trump's unwell. What do you think of that? Do you think he's well?
He looked pretty alert and well to me when he was giving his press conference.
He looked pretty sleepy. I'm sure it had been a long day for him abducting a foreign leader.
He clearly hadn't been to sleep through the night, and he was reading a very important press statement. But when he was answering questions from the press, he was as alert and engaged as we usually see him.
Do you think the British government's line on this is correct this morning?
Darren Jones has been doing the rounds and was basically just sort of sitting on the fence saying nothing, which they've got a problem on the left because many of the socialists in the Labour Party would prefer Maduro to Trump, which I think tells you a lot about the socialist regime running the country.
They might just think, I haven't heard anyone in the Labour Party expressing any admiration for Maduro, but what they probably think is that it's not a very good idea for the world's most powerful country to go around the world abducting people.
Well, at the end of the day, he's an indicted narco-terrorist under US law. Under US law. And so they've made that decision. And frankly, let's, what we hope now is that for the Venezuelan people, they will get the prospect to be better off under a properly democratically elected government.
What if they fancy taking someone from this country just because they want to? Well, that's all right.
Well, that's what international warrants for arrest are.
Yeah, and you need to respect international.
This is where legality and power fully collide.
And let's just remind ourselves: the US, the UK, and the EU have viewed Maduro as an illegitimate dictator for many, many years, and he's an indicted narco-terrorist.
There is suggestion and talk in Magaland about other potential territorial acquisitions or in the Western Hemisphere. You may have seen Stephen Miller's wife, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, tweeting a picture of Greenland with a big American flag across it saying, soon. Would you urge your friends in the MAGA world to leave Greenland alone?
We're talking about Venezuela. We're not talking about Greenland. I think that's for the birds.
But surely you would think it was a bad idea if they would invade Greenland.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do that, and I don't think that's a good idea, obviously.
And so you would tell your friends in MAGA that it would be bad. They should.
Did you say sell or tell? At the end of the day, on the issue of Venezuela, Maduro has gone, and I think that's good for the West.
Panama Canal? Should Trump take that? He said he wanted that before. Are we against that?
Take Trump seriously. Don't take every word literally. He's acting what they perceive are the American interests. They've indicted Maduro many years ago. So no one should be that surprised by what has happened. And it will give a lot of dictators and...
This entire debate turns on one moment. Let's take out the Colombians, because that line exposes the truth beneath the talking points. If you argue that power justifies action, then rules stop meaning anything. The guest wants strength without limits. The presenter forces that idea to its logical end, and suddenly it doesn't sound so comfortable. The hero here isn't a politician. It's the question that refused to go away. Because once you accept kidnapping leaders in the name of interest, you don't get to choose who does it next. That's the danger. Not Venezuela, not Trump, but the precedent.
Oh, it was internal. You didn't find anything. I don't trust it. I want a national inquiry. You absolutely
I wouldn't say that.
That's what you and everybody else would say. Much better. Have a national inquiry and look at the whole picture.
So we can't trust the inquiry that you'd have. It's not worth having.
Including the Chinese communist regime's influence in the Labour Party that's about to grant consent for a mega embassy in a strategically important part of the city of London.
You're 100% confident that the Russian government made no other attempts to subvert anyone in your party.
I am very confident. I'm very, very confident that that everything is being done properly and correctly in reform, and that's why we're leading in over 170 national polls, give or take 10% ahead of any other party. Do you know what? Actually, people, they want reform, and if you want reform, you've got to vote reform.
Are you worried? There is a lot of speculation, I think maybe a bit overdone at the moment, but there's some speculation, some commentary that reform's peaked. Has reform peaked?
We haven't peaked, but obviously, polls don't go up in straight lines in the same way markets don't move in straight lines. We're taking a strategic pause for breath as we move forward, keep accelerating. But obviously, the higher you go, the harder it is to go ever higher.
You're going to have a pause for breath at some point, because you're going to have your honeymoon with your new wife.
Well, there is that as well.
Richard Tice.
So here's the real question for you. If this logic is acceptable when your side uses it, are you prepared for it when your enemies do? If you value real scrutiny over slogans, like the video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.